Being judgmental. It's one of those words that people use these days to insult someone or show them down or belittle them. Don't be so judgmental is what they say when they see someone wearing socks with sandals. Don't be so judgmental, they say, when they see someone spitting gupka on the wall. Don't be judgmental, they say, when they happen to be sharing space with someone who hasn't apparently showered in a week. The funny thing is, when they're saying that you shouldn't be judgmental, they're judging you for being judgmental, therefore being judgmental themselves. But what is judgment and where does it come from? Being judgmental is what's kept us alive for thousands of years, if not more. Definitely more. Because if our caveman ancestors hadn't judged a particularly brightly colored berry to be poisonous, we wouldn't be alive today. So, what does being judgmental even mean? Where did it come from? And why does it make dinner parties so much more interesting? Let's find out. A dictionary definition defines the word judgmental as having or displaying an excessively critical point of view, which is ironic because the definition sounds a bit judgmental in itself. What it is your brain's built in Yelp review system. If you see someone running towards you in an overcoat in the middle of June, you would figure that something's not right about that. Imagine, for instance, that you're about to go get ice cream. And you have three options to choose from. Ice cream 1 looks stale and smells a bit off. Ice cream 2 looks fine, smells fine, but has a fly on it. The third one looks promising, looks fine, no insect on it, smells fine. Regardless of what option you choose, you have practiced judgment. If you chose the ice cream that looks stale and smells off, regardless of how it ends up tasting, you took a call. In a way, you practice judgment. Call it a good judgment or a bad judgment, but you either judge the situation and took a call, or practice the judgment to not let the data in front of you influence a decision you're about to take. Either way, good or bad, is not the point here. The point is that you practice judgment. In the same way, if you choose the second ice cream, the one that has an insect on it, you practice judgment. And if you chose the third, the one that looks fine and smells fine and has no insect on it, well, you still practice judgment. Good judgment or bad judgment is simply not the point here. The point is just to say that the judgment existed for you to take the call. The only way to surpass this evolutionarily ingrained instinct, that is judgment, would be to keep your eyes closed, your nose closed, and hope for the best. Whether you practice good judgment or bad depends on many factors. Did you want to eat the ice cream for the pleasure one derives from eating ice cream? Or did you want the pleasure of specifically being perceived as non-judgmental, regardless of however that affects you? It's just interesting to know that in the latter case, where you take your decisions based on not wanting to be perceived as judgmental, you want to be perceived, you want to be judged as non-judgmental. But of course, not all situations demand decisions with the same impact as choosing what ice cream to eat. We evolved to judge whether situations are safe or not. But imagine you're the caveman and you see a Neanderthal running towards you with a spear in his hand. It doesn't matter what you want to do, but you're genetically programmed to either fight or flee or freeze. The inherent instinct is to judge. It is entirely natural. You got to figure if that situation is safe and react accordingly. Evolution, interestingly, has been a cause and consequence of judgment. Judgment was important for our basic survival. Our ancestors would have to judge if an unknown caveman was coming to share a meal or to steal their meal or make them their meal. Fast forward a few thousand years, and now we judge people on the way that they say croissant.
Croissant?
And this, dear followers, is how judgment, much like us, has evolved. The example of the Neanderthal running towards you with a spear equates to any situation or person or food or anything that is unfamiliar to you. If you're particularly good at pronouncing the word croissant and you come across someone who isn't particularly adept at pronouncing the word croissant, the only thing that the judgment will highlight that a difference exists. Whether this difference is consequential or not is entirely a different ballgame. Should it affect you? Should it affect how you treat the other person or how much you respect them? Well, There are going to be people who dismiss the other person or make fun of them or cut them out of their life or something like that. But in the grand scheme of things, does it matter? To some, it does. To others, it doesn't. In the grand scheme, the universe doesn't care. If you're the kind of person who knew how to pronounce it properly, you would feel safer around people who also know how to pronounce it properly, simply because you would relate to the other person. You would find a commonality with the other person. You would feel like you're with familiar people. It's the same exact concept that allows you to feel vulnerable and your uninhibited self in front of close friends and family, as opposed to complete strangers or a judge in court. If you're the kind of person who didn't know how to pronounce it properly, you would feel safer with other people who don't know how to pronounce it properly because you have that commonality. You will feel more welcome and understood by those people. We have evolved to find comfort in familiarity because familiarity delivers a sense of security, safety, the absence of threat. The example of dealing with people who do know how to pronounce the word person versus not is one really tiny example of other differences that you might have with people. Like, for example, one's eating habits, or the way someone dresses, or what value systems the other person holds. It only highlights a difference. It says nothing about if that difference is a threat to you, or if you should dismiss that difference, or you should make a big deal about the difference. The only point is that a difference exists. One may scoff at it or gossip about it for reasons that may seem malicious. But in truth, evolution again has trained us to talk about unfamiliar and strange things that happen to us with people we have familiar contacts with, about people with whom we have unfamiliar contacts. The basis of humor is to highlight something uncomfortable. Laughter is a reaction which we have when we find a particular thing unexpected, or we just feel uncomfortable about something and we don't know how else to react. Humor comes from absurdity. If you'd like a video on what makes things funny and why people love to be offended by it, drop a comment down below. I'm going to do that. It's on my list anyway. But anyway, the point is that gossip isn't done for the sake of malice. Malice is collateral damage. It doesn't even directly cause malice. It's just that the negativity bias that we all are blessed with because of evolution makes us particularly anxious about what other people might say. Not realizing that A, people are gonna say whatever they perceive to be true, and not much you can say is going to change their perception unless they're willing to listen to reason more than instinct. And second, that nobody would care because those people will be preoccupied with what people think of them. Try to think about all the times that you have laughed at someone else's embarrassment repeatedly over and over again. And if that makes you feel any different about the person. Interestingly enough, it's more plausible that the moment you've witnessed someone's vulnerability like that, no matter how much fun you make of it, it endears you to the other person. No matter how many times the situation is laughed at, you will make fun of them again. But not because you mean harm. You just want it to be funny, I guess. But in most cases anyway. People, being people, tend to take things personally. But it's almost never personal. The difference, such as in culture or color or belief system, is unfortunately automatically seen as a threat. There are reasons, evolutionary reasons, ingrained in our DNA for us to behave that way. All of unfamiliarity was supposed to be treated like a threat. For the early man, it was easier to trust people with similarities more than differences. When you belong to a similar culture or belief system or have shared interests and shared problems, you are less likely to have a conflict of interest. You are less likely to have an argument. When we come to think of it all, though, our intellect has evolved much more rapidly than our DNA. Our instincts and behaviors, therefore, haven't caught up with the modern world. Our world at this point has become quite homogenized. We all eat the same food, we wear the same clothes, drink the same drink, exist on the same platforms, looking at the same content and talking about the same things. And in this world where human beings have more in common with each other than we ever did before, it has made the concept of judgment easier and more difficult, and less necessary and more necessary. If you would like for me to delve into that particular rabbit hole, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do about that. And there's always content. Now, having established that the differences exist, we come to the modern colloquial definition of judgment, addressing in particular the notion when people say that judging is bad. Well, if someone comes to you who is very different from you and just entirely dismiss and push them away, um, I wouldn't call that particularly good manners, but this conversation is not about manners anyway. I would, however, say that the word judgment has of late been given this particularly negative connotation, and it's a negative connotation that it doesn't really deserve. Judgment is the ability to make considered, sensible decisions based on data. The data could be fact, it could be assumption based on fact, it could be something you heard a while ago, which may or may not be true. This means to make decisions based on whatever data is immediately available. The data would include all discernible differences and similarities. But again, because the negativity bias and the fact that our DNA thinks we're in danger all the time, our instinct highlights the differences and sees if we should put up with the other person or run away or punch them in the face. Difference, in any case, is the only point of contention in any case. Since we've already discussed why we do this, let's move on to it being wrong or not. One might compare it to judging a book by its cover, but fact of the matter is that books tend to be written by one person and the cover designed by another, if the cover is designed at all. When it comes to situations, you have the opportunity of looking at parts of the sum and maybe in its individual or collective sense figure if a situation is good for you, safe for you. When it comes to people, all you have to do is look at their face, look into their eyes. You would see how they're feeling, or what they want to do. You would see if they're happy or sad or angry, and based on that, it would be fair to figure what they might want out of you, if anything at all. Yes, the face has expressions which tell you what the other person is feeling, but that's not really it. If someone is, let's just say someone hasn't showered in a week. Yes, they haven't showered in a week. You have judged them that they're in a situation that they haven't showered in a week. It could be because they're homeless, or it could be because they're depressed. It could be any reason. And how you choose to react to it is entirely your call. If you want to delve into that conversation and ask, hey, what's up with this? Versus if you just want to step away. But I mean, like, you'll be practicing judgment either way. When it comes to judging anything except books, you have the opportunity to get a more authentic impression of the said person or situation. Based, of course, on what evolution has taught us to be triggers for safe versus unsafe situations. Every single time you do something as plain as, I don't know, getting out of bed, you've done it enough times to know what it feels like. If something is off, and you say that you have a gut feeling about something, well, your gut is your third brain. It's actually true. I'm not kidding about this. A gut feeling is your body telling you that something is off. Your DNA doesn't care about accurate information. Your DNA doesn't really care about how you feel or how you react. Your DNA just cares about keeping you safe enough for it to reproduce itself. If it sees any reason, any situation to trigger the fight or flight response, it would. Now, let me be extremely clear here. I by no means whatsoever intend to imply that a difference is a threat. I am putting it very simply that our bodies are hardwired to think of differences as threats. They usually aren't. As a caveman in a jungle, if you hear some rustling behind some leaves, you would imagine the worst and think that it's some predator about to eat you. It could be a bird. it could be a dog, it could be a donkey, but you are going to imagine lion because your DNA wants you to imagine the worst case scenario and just get yourself in a safe position. In the same way, we are scared more often than we have a need to be. We always imagine the worst. We get our defenses up because although the chances of there being a lion behind the bush is extremely low, it could be anything. It could be anything at all. But we're gonna imagine lion because we gotta make ourselves safe. It's not us; it's our DNA, and the connotations and consequences it leads to are usually beyond control. Human instincts, however, beg to differ for reasons that are scientifically justifiable, but intellectually and socially, not so much. To ignore all red flags, though, is how people end up in toxic relationships, if not literally dead underwater. Not acknowledging a difference is anti evolutionary. It's potentially extremely unsafe and particularly offensive to whoever is different. Imagine a queer person being told, hey, you're the same as us, there's just no difference whatsoever. Your individuality is relevant because everything's just equal and the same, and everyone is the same. Therefore, your identity and ideas and opinions are being dismissed. They don't matter. The inverse would be just as distressing. Imagine a straight person being told by a group of gay people that, hey, you're exactly like us. There's just no difference whatsoever. Whatever opinions or ideas you have that make you an individual are irrelevant, so your identity is being dismissed. The same example is true if you substitute the idea of sexuality with race or gender or nationality or religion. The idea is just about the difference and the point of contention between acknowledging the difference or not acknowledging the difference. What to do, how to react to the difference. To dismiss a difference, I would say, is detrimental not just to society, but also to the intellectual and curious endeavor of mankind. From differences, we learn. Let's just say you are a neurosurgeon and you happen to be in a bar and you get into a conversation with a music teacher. You might be an incredibly celebrated, famous, intelligent neurosurgeon. And there's this difference where, you may scoff at the other person for pursuing art instead of science. And well, congratulations to you for learning science. But, well, this other guy who is different is going to have things to say that you can't have an opinion over because you don't know about it. You can dismiss or you could learn. But in either of those things, you would have to admit that there is a difference that you are reacting to. Why are we so judgmental though? It turns out it's because our brains are lazy. Instead of analyzing every single detail of every single situation particularly carefully, our brain likes to take shortcuts. When you see someone with a tattoo all over their face, you would imagine that they've lived a life that made them think that that was a good idea. You could choose to be scared about it, or you could choose to speak to the person and see what that's about. And until you do either of those things, your judgments are the figment of your imagination. Once you do get the facts in order, though, your judgment is going to be more rounded and factually relevant. You might even get some insight out of it. Or, for example, if you hear the 50-year-old say something like, Skibbity the drip was half the Riz no cap, and you need to decide if you want to ever speak to that person again. We judge for all sorts of reasons. Ego, insecurity, boredom, lack of another topic to talk about. Sometimes it's a sport. Everyone's watched this elderly aunt at a wedding whispering about the bride's dress or moments that may or may not have transpired before the wedding. That woman is playing Wimbledon level judgment. I mean, maybe she's trying to. I don't know how good this particular aunt is at judging people and situations. They mostly aren't. You may agree with her or disagree with her, be it about her insights or intentions. But things like this tend to happen when there's a lull in conversation and that particular aunt doesn't want to be judged as boring. Guilty conscience, I suppose. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's consider the case for being judgmental. First off, it keeps standards high. You judge a restaurant for its hygiene and food quality. You avoid food poisoning. You judge a person's etiquette before dating them so that you could avoid a few years of therapy. Judgmental people is why we have Michelin stars or quality control. And it's exactly why pineapple on pizza is a point of contention and not normalcy. Without judgment, there would be chaos. There would be people wearing Crocs to job interviews. They would meow like cats in a place as serious as a parliament, obstructing matters of importance at hand, urinate on random people, and nobody would say a word. The people who do this would be alleged to lack civic sense, lose respectability, and not be taken seriously, let alone be welcomed particularly warmly. People who suffer the consequences of such Diogenes esque behavior would prefer to not engage with the perpetrator for, if nothing else, personal safety. The person in court, given the responsibility of delivering justice, is called a judge. That's because he or she assesses the data given to them and judges the right from the wrong, based, of course, on the interpretations of the Constitution and biases, but different, different thing, different thing. Without the judgment of a judge, we would be in a society that still relies on the insanity of mob mentality, where the consequences of the mob mentality may or may not be justified. Now, in favor of the case of not being judgmental, well, it can make you come off as a bit insufferable. You start rolling your eyes at people who stand up from their seat the moment the plane lands, and soon enough you're sneering at a Supreme Court judge because they don't know what the word "gyat" means. And before you know it, you have no friends or anyone who's willing to speak to you because everyone except the Japanese eat their sushi raw. The solution then perhaps is to judge without being mean or ignorant or stupid about it. Also, perhaps consider the seriousness of the outcome, keeping in mind the harm principle. Like, for example, when the people who drive in the opposite direction to traffic, which is extremely popular in NCR, but also other states. This can cause congestion or accidents or death. And the people who are late for the meeting or in need of urgent medical care would be stuck because someone's being an idiot. Worst case scenario, the perpetrator gets away, and even if he doesn't, I mean, the perpetrator as well as the victim both waste their time and money and life in courts, which of course warrants a stronger response than someone eating sushi wrong. Yeah, no, seriously, they eat with their hands. They eat sushi with their hands. They do. They just use the chopsticks to put the wasabi on it. Or you know, pick up the pickled ginger. The two situations, of course, both warrant judgment, but don't really deserve the same intensity of consideration or consequence. If it really does matter to you how sushi is eaten or the word poisson is pronounced, judge, but inquire about the person's context. Then judge more. Not just the person, but also judge what leads you to have a problem with it and why it matters and what this one particular difference means to you and what kind of consequences it could have, what it could imply with regards to your compatibility with this other person, and if at all you want to address the problem or say anything about it, and if it's worth the bother. Judge all of these situations, think it through. If you don't judge anything at all, you're going to be sitting there thinking nothing, saying nothing, being nothing, and that sounds like brain dead behavior to me. Also, being overly judgmental can make you wrong. There's bound to be times when you've met someone and hated their guts and eventually found them to be genuinely good company. Except, of course, about people who lack civic sense. You know, the kind of people who drive in the opposite direction to traffic, the kinds who litter, the kind who spit pan masala on walls. Well, they deserve judgment. They really do deserve judgment because they're clearly doing something that's against the interest of the larger society. I mean, put in front of a judge, the judge would judge if they're worth punishment. And well, the law doesn't entirely allow you to serve them. the punishment in far too many ways. Hey, judge and either have a conversation or leave. But just to put up with it and saying nothing, doing nothing, well, you may have just missed an opportunity to make a difference. For example, speaking of defecation, yes, people need the shit. It is a biological need. I, however, assume that you would not appreciate it if someone did it at your doorstep every morning. I don't expect that it would entice you to ask them out to dinner. Yes, using a lavatory is a norm that is imposed by society that no other animal abides by. But society has imposed that norm for reasons. The reasons include hygiene and safety and, well, just staying healthy and, well, if nothing else, just not making the immediate area smell. Should you meet somebody who does enjoy defecating at people's doorsteps, it would be wise for you to practice judgment. Practice judgment with regards to why this person might be doing this, or what this means, or how it affects you, or how you staying around that person affects you. Ask questions, don't ask questions, but judge. Both good judgment and bad judgment come with its own set of consequences. But to deny one's instinct, a defense mechanism that has kept us alive and thriving for millions of years, won't keep us alive for very long. When you accidentally touch something that is particularly hot, your nervous system has this instinctive response to just pull away. Listen to it. The body's telling you something. You don't have to take everything particularly serious, but do listen to it. Definitely listen to it. Judgment has consequences. Intended ones where you might avoid an online scam or a bad relationship or stupid movies starring Salman Khan. Personally, I don't discriminate. I don't watch any movies whatsoever. But it has unintended consequences as well. You might miss out on friendships or opportunities or really deep, meaningful, intellectually stimulating pieces of art that are a satirical commentary on society starring Salman Khan. No, I can't name any. Again, I don't watch any movies. Also, people might judge you for being judgmental, which is inception level hypocrisy. So, where does it leave us? Should we judge? Should we not judge? The truth is, you will judge. It is ingrained in your DNA. It's what's kept you alive. You can't not judge. People make this active effort to not judge because society until Trump was elected said it was bad. Things have changed now. But use judgment wisely. Don't let it influence your decisions entirely, but engage in judgment to see how it should influence your decisions at all. You will make mistakes in judgment. You will make mistakes in everything. It is human to make judgments and it's human to make others. I mean, someone else would judge you, will may or may not judge you. You may or may not want to judge yourself. But things like wit or tact or wisdom or the sense of humor might get you out of it. Otherwise, you're just annoying. Just know that you're gonna judge people. People are gonna judge you. How much it matters or not depends on how much you decide it matters to you.